What's up, guys? Welcome into the premiere episode of Browns Prospect Spotlight here on the OBR streaming network. I'm your host, Jacob. You can find me on X at Roachism13, and I'm a little bit new to the OBR, but here to bring you a lot of awesome draft content. And we're going to do this show each week and kind of talk about some of my early rankings for the 2025 NFL draft. And it's going to be scoped around a lot of positions that the Browns are looking at and some things that I think they're going to kind of do. And it's going to run into kind of run parallel with some of the stuff that I'm writing over at the OBR. So if you've read some of these articles, maybe some of this is a little redundant, but this week I want to quickly talk about my top 3 running backs in this class. This class is loaded, guys. Like, I'm looking at these top 3 guys. I consider them first round talents as long as they continue to play the way they're playing, especially if they take more steps forward. I think these guys are first round talents. We know that the NFL has kind of devalued the running back position some, so I don't know that they'll all actually go in the first round. But in terms of when I make my big board of overall prospects, these guys will probably be in the top 32 because I think they're that kind of talent. And there's a bunch of other guys that I really like. Travion Henderson doesn't make this list. Ollie Gordon doesn't make this list. Some other guys that are on there. What's his name? Kyle Monangai. He's played really well for Rutgers. And then Jaden Ott. Those are guys I really think are really good running backs. They're not in my top 3, but they're guys that are probably top 50 picks as well. So I think this is a good year to need a running back. And the Browns kind of, Jerome Ford's the only one under contract of any significance past this year. So we'll see what happens with Nick Chubb and that sort of thing. So let's jump right on into it and start with number 3 on my list. That's Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina. So far this year, he's played in 3 games for the Tar Heels. He has 406 yards on the ground with a 6.3 yards per carry average and 3 touchdowns. He had a massive season for the Tar Heels last year. In 13 games, he had 1,504 yards on 5.9 yards per carry and 15 touchdowns. And that, of course, was playing with Drake May. Omarion Hampton, I think he's got good size at the running back position, 6'1", 220 pounds. I think he's a punishing runner. He's at 6'1", 220, but kind of like he's real long. He looks bigger, and he runs bigger. He runs like a 250, 260 pound bruiser, but he's still nimble and agile. Just really nice length. I think he can be a really impactful pass catcher because I think he can make some of those difficult checkdowns when somebody's hanging all over him or on the goal line when you're trying to get some in there. His contact balance is just fantastic. You better bring your big boy pants if you're going to try to tackle him. He is looking to punish you. I call him punishing runner for a reason. And I think that's because he's going to lower his shoulder. He's going to bring the boom, run in on every run. I think he's explosive in his acceleration. He lacks elite top speed. He's not going to be outrunning a ton of defenders, but he has good top speed, especially for a guy that I would consider a power back, and he gets to that speed pretty quickly. So he may not be, running a 4.4, that sort of thing, but he gets up there really good. I think he's kind of a patient runner. But I think the thing that you really come back with is, hey, he's got more speed and burst than you think he's going to. So don't just look at Omarion Hampton and think, hey, this is just a punishing runner, because I think he's an explosive accelerator. One thing I think his footwork can be concerning at times. I've seen him in a few times kind of trip over people and trip over his own feet while he's trying to kind of juke people out of their shoes in the open field, because he's a good athlete, good body control, but I wouldn't call him elite in those areas. The elite areas for him are, contact balance, getting to his top speed, and just running through arm tackles. So I think he is that good of a punishing runner that he is number 3 in my list. So Omarion Hampton, North Carolina, I think that's a name Browns fans should check out. Let's shift gears over to my number 2 running back in this class. And I think a lot of people may have him at number 1, and that's Boise State's Ashton Jeanty. And the difference between Ashton Jeanty and my number 1 that I'll get to in here in just a second is their size. And that's not really something Jeanty can do. Just a smaller guy at 5'9", but he's built really well for 5'9" at 217 pounds, almost as big size-wise as Omarion Hampton, but significantly shorter, about 4 inches or so. So this is, I love his stats from the first 2 games because they're ridiculous stats. So in 2 games, he's got 459 yards rushing, which is on 10.2 yards per carry through 2 games, and 9 touchdowns. This dude has 9 touchdowns in 2 collegiate games. Like if you didn't have Jeanty on your list of household names in the 2025 draft, he really kicked the door down. Not that he didn't, have almost 2,000 all-purpose yards last year, but 9 touchdowns. He had 6 touchdowns opening week. It's funny that you could have 3 touchdowns in your second game of the season, and that be half the amount of touchdowns you had the game before, because 3 touchdowns is a lot of rushing touchdowns. And now you're looking at a guy that had half the amount of rushing touchdowns week 2 because he had so many ridiculous amounts. In 12 games for Boise last year, he had 1,347 rushing yards on 6.1 yards per carry. He also had 569 receiving yards. They haven't really thrown in the ball much this year. Hasn't been big impact there, but he had 19 total touchdowns for the Broncos last year. Another guy that arm tackles won't get it done. He's not quite the bruiser that Omarion Hampton is, but he's got more than enough power. I think he's really powerful over half. When he gets held up, if you try to go high, he has the power in his base, in his leg drive to get extra yardage. You got to hit him low, because if you try to hold him up and you think you're just going to outmuscle him, he will keep those legs moving. He will drive you back several more yards, get several, 3, 4, 5 extra yards. One thing that I really love is he's got such good speed, change of direction. He can slam on the brakes and just stop. I mean, this dude's his body control, I think, is just ridiculous. I think it's an elite trait where he can be at top speed and just stop and send defenders flying and then get right back up to top speed again, man. And he's got probably, I think, the best vision in this class of the guys that I've watched, and there's plenty of guys that haven't gotten to yet at this point. It's only September, but his vision, he will find the best running lane. If there is a good run lane somewhere, he will find it and he will exploit it. He's very decisive. I think as soon as it's there, he is not going to hesitate. He's patient. Don't get me wrong. He's not going to rush into something, be like, nothing else is going to develop, I'm going to go here. No, he will be patient and he will let the play develop in front of him. But once he sees that lane, he's not going to hesitate. He's going to go through that. He's going to get to his top speed and he's going to pick up yardage. I think he's a natural pass catcher. And his ability to make plays and change direction in the open field it's just ridiculous for me. I mean, you're talking about putting your foot in the ground and changing directions at the drop of a hat. That's what Ashton Jeanty can do. And the only reason he's not number 1 for me is it's just a smaller frame at 5'9", and I'm just not sure about some of the dirt. He's not really had injury concerns at Boise State, but we know that the NFL is a whole nother level when it comes to things like that. So I'm not really sure about the size difference. My number 1, that's the difference between them. That was the deciding factor for me, was my number 1's bigger. And my number 1 is so Ashton Jeanty. Oh, one more thing about Ashton Jeanty. I'd be very angry watching this video back if I did not say this. I hate player comps because I think you get unrealistic. You're like, man, this guy looks like Emmitt Smith or whatever. It looks like Barry Sanders with his ability to make people miss in the open field, and you're setting yourself up for failure comparing them to, because then even if they're really great players, but they don't get to what you were told they were supposed to be, who they were compared to, you get a little bit disappointed. But Ashton Jeanty, I can't help but think about Nick Chubb when I watch Ashton Genty. Just his ability to win with speed, his ability to win with power, and his vision and his change of direction. It's all Nick Chubb stuff that I see and you guys see all the time as Browns fans. Can't wait for Nick Chubb to be back. But that is just a comparison that I absolutely have to do. All right, guys. My number one running back in this year's class is Quinshon Judkins, the Ohio State running back. His teammate, Travion Henderson, comes in at number 4 on the list. We'll talk about him at a future date. So Quinshon Judkins this year is, as a running back 1, his numbers are not going to wow you this season because he is splitting carries with another guy that I think is a top 5 running back in college football in Henderson. So through 2 games, he's only got 22 carries, 163 yards on 7.4 yards per carry. He does have 3 touchdowns, and he did have a 70-yard touchdown called back due to a penalty. So his big playability is there. Before coming to Ohio State, he played 13 games last year for Ole Miss, 1,158 yards on 4.3 yards per carry and 15 touchdowns. If I am looking at player upside traits and past college production, he comes out on top. You put all of that stuff together and you say, Quinshon Judkins has everything. That's the difference for me between Ashton Genty and Judkins is the size. He comes in about 6 foot, 6'1", 220 pounds. Another guy that can win with speed, can win with power. I think if you're going to go after him, you need to go low. He will punish you if you go high, and he will enjoy it. He will lay the lumber. He will play very physical. He can be a power back and an explosive weapon. Like, I'm looking at my notes off to the side, and that's the first thing that I had to write down while watching Judkins was he can be a power back, he can be an explosive weapon, whatever it is he needs to be, he can do those sorts of things. He's turning 21 in October, so he will play half of his rookie year as a 21-year-old and be 22 for half of his rookie season next fall. I think he can be a workhorse. I think he can be a 30-plus carry guy because I think he has the durability, the size, the physicality, but also the playmaking to where you can use him in a multitude of different ways. He hasn't been used a ton as a pass catcher. He actually has no catches right now for Ohio State in the first 2 games, which is very interesting because I think his skill set and his ability to kind of change direction works really well as a route runner out of the backfield and as a guy getting the ball to him in the open field in space and allowing him to create. I think he's really good at that. One thing that I know Browns fans will love, this dude can pass protect. Like, I love watching Quinshon Judkins pass protect at Ole Miss. Like I said, he's a violent, punishing runner. Well, he is going to hit you if you're trying to rush his quarterback too. And the thing is, with his ability to kind of accelerate and be explosive, he can smack somebody in the mouth, leak out, catch a pass, and get 20 yards. Like, I just think he can do all of it, man. Like, I think one of the biggest knocks with him, though, he's very patient, but sometimes he's just far too patient. I just think sometimes he's a little too patient and ends up trying to maybe this is going to develop, maybe it's going to work out, maybe the blockers are going to set up, and maybe I can get 7 or 8 yards instead of running right now and getting 3, and then he ends up maybe taking a loss or something like that. I think it's probably his biggest knock. But I will say, combined at Ole Miss, it was 2,700 rushing yards in his last 2 seasons as a starter. I just think he is above the rest. I just think the physical makeup, the traits, the production, it's all there. You have it all in a pretty little bow in a package with Quinshon Judkins, and he would be my number 1 running back off the board. And I absolutely think Judkins and Ashton Genty belong in the first round, and I think they will be there.